Good morning. Who's on the phone with us?
This is Steve in Boise.
Hi, Steve. Let me send you the presentation so as we're going through it, you'll know what the heck we're talking about.
Okay, great. That'd be wonderful.
Can you send the presentation? 1 minute. Sorry, 1 minute. I know we're late. Good morning. Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay without a room mic? Okay. Great. Well, welcome and thank you for coming. This presentation today is talking about the focus for the future and the technology-related proposals specifically. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dan Ewart. I'm Chief Information Officer for the university. And let's go ahead and get started. So, a little bit of logistics here. We have some folks on the phone. If you are on the phone, if you wouldn't mind muting your phone for the time being, we're going to do the presentation first, and then I'll take questions afterwards. So I want to make sure we get through the information, but we'll have plenty of time for questions. And if we do happen to run out of time for questions, we have another session this afternoon, and I will be available for the next 2 weeks to talk through this stuff with you. So let's hold the questions until the very end. It is being recorded on video, so we can play it back later. For those who know people who couldn't attend anytime today, we'll have it recorded so they can hear what's going on as well. For those of you on the phone, if you have questions, at the end you're welcome to do them over the phone, or there's an email address that is in the presentation that we just sent you, and you can send your questions there and they'll get to me for the rest of the day. All right. With that, let's go ahead and get started. Hopefully most of you know what Focus for the Future was all about. It was a mandate from the State Board of Education that we look at our programs and do some prioritization for those programs. Good morning.
Hello.
We're just getting started. Who's this?
This is Rob from Coeur d'Alene, Rob Baxter.
Hi, Rob. Rob, we're going to send you the presentation. It'll be on its way.
Great, thanks.
Okay. So the Focus for the Future was a mandate of the State Board of Education, but it was a really positive step for UI. And really, it's just the first step in finding ways that we can be more efficient and more effective in our jobs. But it's almost been a year-long process now. And it resulted in the examination of almost 400 academic or administrative programs. So it was a very extensive effort. It was mostly conducted by the deans, the folks at my level, the vice presidents, and things like that. So the goal of it was to identify ways as an institution that we can be more efficient, that we can save some money, and that we can then reinvest that money into the priorities of the institution. That was really the goals, the major goals of the FFF. So the memo that most of you received, and probably why you're here, was from Provost Aiken, was the result of a lot of work, as we've mentioned. But there were 14 non-academic proposals, and there were a number of academic proposals. So there's a number of meetings just like this going on across the university today, tomorrow, next week. And if you're interested in those, I encourage you to check that list at the back of Provost Aiken's memo. Some of them are college-specific, but just so you know. This is the most important point in this entire presentation as far as I'm concerned. All of these things, the 14 and all the academic side, and the 2 specifically that we're going to be talking about today, are proposals. There's no decisions been made yet. Okay? These are great ideas with some background information, and it's a lot of thought put into them, but it's critical that we get the input of everybody in this room and everybody across our university into these proposals, because that's how they will number one, decide whether they're going to go forward or not. But two, if they are decided that they go forward, that's how they're going to be successful. Okay? So I know that oftentimes we think, oh, this decision's already been made and this is just an information session. Truly not the case. So I'm excited about hearing your input, and we'll talk a little later about how you can get that input to me. All right. So specifically in the FFF, there were two technology proposals. The first one was labeled Consolidate Selected IT Functions, and we're going to talk about each one of these in more detail, so there'll be more detail coming. The second one was to support a limited but robust set of technology purchase options. This one is more of the centralized technology purchasing concept. Together, the hope is that they will improve support, efficiencies, and create savings for the institution. If one of these things doesn't happen, if the decision is made to not proceed, the other one can be successful. It is my opinion that they will be more successful if they're combined. And that's why I proposed both of these things, and that's why we had these discussions during the FFF. But they are separate but complementary proposals. All right, so let's get into the meat of this. The consolidate selected IT functions. I'm going to read for just a second. Through a selective centralization of technology processes, services, and personnel into ITS, I strongly believe that we can accomplish these things. We can create a little deeper team than many of us have right now and that many of us operate in. There's a lot of opportunity for the people in this room and others for career advancement and development of additional skills. We can eliminate some of the duplicative technology that exists at our university that costs us a lot of money and time and effort. And we can try to create some sustainability and a budget model for technology at the institution that will bring us back to the point where many of you probably know we were one of the top 100 wired campuses, and we were written up in articles about our success in technology. And that's really where I'd like to see us get back to. Okay, so that's a lot of nice words, but what does this really mean? What are we thinking about undertaking as far as this goes? There's some things we're going to have to do. The first thing we're going to have to do is find a way to prioritize things at an institutional level that still balances the needs of the individual units and the university. So the only way this is successful is if we create this kind of prioritization framework. And it's something that we don't really have right now at an institutional level. We need to be able to take a look, again, institutionally at our technology risks and develop some mitigation plans. And there's all kinds of risks. And we're not going to get into all those details today because that's some of the feedback that I want to hear from all of you and others across the university. We need to look at all the open technology positions and determine the best institutional use of those positions. And that's a tough concept. And I understand that's a tough concept. But if we're going to look at this institutionally, we have to do it here with open positions as well. We need to look at the technologies that are already implemented. We need to look for what are truly duplications, and we need to get rid of those duplications. Because the duplications are what are costing a lot of money and effort, and they're somewhat preventing us from being able to have the resources to do the things that we really need to do. The definition of duplication is something we'll all have to discuss, right? I think there are some that are fairly obvious, and I think there are some that we'll have some spirited debate about, and that's okay, because that's what this is all about. And last but not least, we're going to have to look at the people who currently have technology functions. And we're going to have to see where the best organizational fit is for those employees. Is it in ITS? Is it in the departments? Is it in a new unit that we haven't considered yet? We need to have that discussion. Okay. So one of the next questions I always get asked is who's going to be involved in this whole process? And the easy answer is everybody. All the people in this room will most certainly be involved. ITS will lead this process. That's if it goes forward, if the proposal is accepted, ITS will lead the process, but it has to be a collaborative process to be successful. We're going to need input from everybody in order to understand this, because we really are talking about looking at this is not just centralization of people, okay? This is looking at processes and technology and people and how those things are combined. And so in order to look and see where all those duplications are and to see where our true needs are and our true risks are, we have to take the time to talk to everybody who's doing technology on campus. Now, that's not all of our users, and there's degrees and definitions of technology that we'll have to talk through if this proposal is accepted. But I think it's critical that we get the input from everybody. We'll also have to get input, obviously, from the leadership across the institution. That mean your supervisors all the way up to the VPs and the president. We need to understand what these priorities are before we can make some of these big decisions. Another critical point, just because we're conducting a review does not mean that everything automatically moves over to ITS. This is not intended to be a mass, unthoughtful centralization process. We need to do what's in the best interest of the units and the university. And there are a ton of different potential outcomes for this review. It can go from, there could be a quick review of a certain piece that, no changes. Obviously, it's working fine. It's where it should be. We move on. We might decommission some technology. We might, move duplicate technology to ITS technology. We might say, hey, you're doing it better than ITS is. We need to build off of what is going on out in the departments. An employee's role may change, but they may stay in the unit that they're in. An employee's role may change, and they may move to ITS. There are so many different possibilities that have come from this outcome. So don't think that this is just a mass influx into ITS. Not then, because I believe that wouldn't work. Okay. How's this going to help us? A lot of bullet points here. There are a lot of ways that this can help in 3 different areas. It can help UI, it can help some of the units, and it can help the people, all of us in this room. First off, I do truly believe that we're going to be able to save some money, and we're going to be able to create some efficiencies that will give us more time to tackle some of the priority initiatives that we really need to do. We need to, as an institution, reduce our risk of relying on one single individual to support a piece of technology that's critically important. We need to get away from that. We need to be able to access, when we have a critical project at the institution, whoever is leading that initiative needs to be able to pull resources from other places that can help with that project. And we really need to, and improving security, technology, budgeting, and spend analysis. Right now our institution does not have a great view of what it spends on technology or how it does its technology spending. And I think this could really benefit that from a strategic perspective. And finally, I think it could really help with a more consistent and robust classification and compensation process for technology employees. I think many of us recognize that the technology industry is a little bit different than some of the other parts of higher education. And we have to be able to compete with corporate entities and other institutions. And so I think that the centralization can actually help with that. It'll give us a more consolidated view of what's going on. I also think there is help for the units through this. There is a lot of reliance on a single person. Many of you who work in departments are forced to be a jack of all trades. Sometimes that's a great thing and you have the skills to do that. There's other times where you don't, and this will give you an opportunity to have other people with deeper skills in other areas that you can rely on. Many times our technology employees out in the units aren't managed by anybody with any technical skills or acumen or experience, and that creates a certain level of challenges as well. And there is a lot of duplicative technology, and I think there's money to be saved in the units by not having to replace that technology or budget for its R&R. I think there's help for us too. I think there's improved career opportunities if we're looking holistically across the institution at what's going on. I think there's more movement available. Management by technology professionals, I already mentioned. There is a distinct opportunity for the development of new and deeper skill sets. When you spread out what's being done, you can get a little deeper. And I've heard this one quite often, that there's oftentimes a significant amount of stress to that person who is out there by themselves in units supporting critical technology. There's a feeling that I can't take a vacation. There's a feeling that I can't go anywhere, or that I'm always worried about something. That's where a team can come in really handy. Okay? I and our deans and other people have put a lot of thought into we call them key considerations, others might call them concerns, about what could happen out of this process. And there's a lot of questions to be answered. So believe me, there's a lot of questions to be answered. Big concern about the impact on our employees. A lot of great work is going on. We don't want to stop that. And we also don't want to damage the morale of our employees by going through a process like this. There's questions about where would employees be located? Would they be moved from their current locations? I'm not supposed to be answering specific questions because this is just a proposal and I want your feedback, but I will tell you a small fact that I have no room to put any other employees in current IT locations. So read into that what you will as far as that particular issue. That prioritization process is going to be very important. It's not something that the institution has really done before, prioritizing institutional initiatives. So that one's going to be a challenge. Common concern that I hear is the response time to issues. Folks who work out in the departments, you're doing an outstanding job of responding immediately to your customers' issues. And if we centralize, how can we accommodate things like that and the need for things like that? This process shouldn't and hopefully doesn't limit the flexibility of units in their budgets. Okay? We need to make sure that that's not a negative impact. I heard the one-size-fits-all concept quite a bit as we were discussing this, that we would be forced into always doing things one way. And I don't think that's the case, and it's certainly I don't think is the right way to do it. What do we do about so many of these positions that they do have technology components to them, but they also have a large functional component to them? How do we address that particular situation? Something we're going to have to discuss. And grant-funded positions. How do we work out the funding issues surrounding all these? And some grant-funded positions have limitations on what they can work on based on how the grant is written. So there are a lot of considerations, and I know that you probably have more, and that's the type of input that I'm really looking for, is what are we not thinking about? What haven't we thought about? What issues do we need to address? Number one, before we make the decision to proceed with this. But number two, if the decision is to proceed with it, how do we implement it? Okay, and how do we do it right? All right. I did want to put up here that we have had some recent successes in this area. ITS has partnered with the College of Science and Student Affairs and the College of Art and Architecture on bringing some of their services or positions and people into ITS. I see great successes out of this. The best thing to do, of course, is to talk to some of the people who have been a part of this, both from the ITS perspective and from the college perspective. And I encourage you to reach out to them if you're interested in that. And, of course, we'll supply some of that information as well. But I see good successes out of what this can do. And I see cost savings, and I see some additional opportunities for employees. So I think we have the right track here, which is why I made this proposal. Okay? So that's the background on the technology centralization kind of concept. The second one is the technology purchase options. And what we need to do is, through the input of folks like you and many other of our constituents across the institution, the proposal is that ITS would develop a list of hardware, software, and cloud-based services that would be approved for use at the institution. Okay? What does that mean? That's an awfully broad definition. First of all, remember, it's just a proposal right now. We need to clarify all of these definitions, and that's where your feedback is important. But this non-inclusive list, I tried to use my legal language, and examples include but are not limited to things like this. Okay? Desktops, laptops, hardware, servers, scanners, copiers, storage. Those kind of concepts are what we are talking about. Why? How is this going to help us? Why are we even bothering to do this? There are economies of scale that we're not capturing right now in our purchasing process. There's a lot of ones and twos. And because of that, we're not getting the pricing that we could get. We purchase a lot of equipment at this university, and we need to take advantage of those economies of scale. I think we can develop a more consistent level of support for our technology if we cut down the number of options a little bit. I think we can still provide the kind of services that people want, but we can provide much better service on a smaller number of technology issues. Minimize duplicative services. There's a trend there. I do believe that we'll be able to improve security out of this. Contract management and asset management are very important. We have so many different technology contracts right now that have different terms in them. That becomes especially important when you start talking about cloud-based services and how we protect our data. So that's important. And asset management is something that as an institution, my opinion is that we don't do that very well right now. We have a lot of technology assets, but we don't really know where they are. We don't really know how they're deployed. And we don't know if they're being used for the best purposes. And it's also sometimes hard to get them back when an employee leaves. So I think that's an area that we can certainly help with. The last one I think is important too. We have literally dozens of people across the institution researching which desktop to buy or which printer to buy or which piece of software to buy. And if we combine our efforts in those particular areas, we'll save a lot of time and be able to take advantage of the things I list up above here, but also we'll be able to spend that time in a little different way, and I think a more value-added way. So just like the other one, there's a lot of concerns identified. And none of these in any way are meant to be flippant, okay? They're not meant to be a joke. Will there be an exception process? There has to be an exception process. You can't standardize everything in an institution as large and diverse as ours, okay? There will always be things that have to be addressed specifically. Will I be able to buy a Windows computer, or do I have to only buy a Mac, or vice versa? There's going to be choices. There has to be choices. But I want to hear that feedback from everybody else. Same thing with Android versus iOS when it comes to tablets and mobile devices. Will this limit the option to explore and innovate? I don't think that it does. I think that it will provide more time to explore and innovate by taking care of the 80% of things that can be done in a more generalized and standardized way. This is a concern that, again, we'll want to discuss. Will these options that we present, will they be able to keep up with the innovation that our faculty and staff and students are trying to take advantage of in our fast-paced environment? I think there's certainly a balance between supportability and innovation, and hopefully we can strike that balance together. I think we've already addressed there's going to be a lot of input on these standards. Will it limit personal choice? It's a good discussion for us to have. Will it result in the loss of unit control over technology funds? Again, I'm not supposed to answer, but not if I have my way. And will it force refresh cycles? Those are good discussions. All of those are good discussions to have. And I'm sure that many of you have additional concerns. So I'm looking forward to hearing those. There are some probable exclusions from some of this, like specific scientific equipment, research computing type of equipment that's a little different model. We'll probably have some exclusions in addition to an exception process, but that's the feedback that I want to get. All right. I have essentially covered my presentation, but I wanted to talk to you just real briefly before we talk about questions about what the next steps are. Okay? This presentation will be made available to you. I'm sorry I finished it 15 minutes before I got up here, so I didn't have a chance to get it out, but I will certainly make it available to all of you to share with your constituents, to share with your friends, whatever the case may be. Again, we're also recording this, so you'll be able to point back to what I said in reference to a specific item. In the provost memo, it mentioned that we have a feedback process during the next 2 weeks. And I know you're sick of me saying this already, but it's so important that you get this feedback to us about these proposals so that our vice presidents can make a decision, an informed decision, about which one of these proposals warrants moving forward and which we shouldn't do. Okay? Because all of these will take time and effort from everybody here. There is a feedback form on the provost's website, and the link is here. We've created a little email address so that you can send specific questions about these two things if you want. I will commit to making sure those also get onto the provost's website feedback so that she and the other folks are able to see all of this feedback. And of course, you can send it to either place and we'll get it either way. I've already had some requests to meet with specific units. I think I meet with the College of Law next week. I am more than glad to do that. I've extended I'll be in Coeur d'Alene and Boise next week at different times, and I've offered to come and meet with them and talk. But if your unit wants to talk to me, let me know. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you have. Write an anonymous letter. If you're concerned about your feedback, but you still want to get it to us, which I really want to get, write an anonymous letter. Let me know. And then I think we'll have some other opportunities as needs arise. If we hit on particular topics that that really need to be discussed in more depth, I'll organize a coffee morning with me or a lunch or something like that where people can come and talk about those specific issues. But really, please remember that this 2-week period is so critical. Oh, sorry. After that 2-week period, that information will be collected, and the executive group will make a decision on whether to proceed or not with the implementation of these activities. And if that decision is to proceed, then we start an implementation planning process for both of these things. Okay, so then we start talking about the scope of them, the timeline, milestones. How are we going to know if we're successful? What are our metrics? None of that stuff is defined right now because this is a proposal. Once the proposal is accepted, we'll move into an implementation phase. Okay. There are going to be a number of chances for you to shape the processes that are involved here if they are accepted, if the proposals are accepted. And I encourage you, and I hope that you will take advantage of those opportunities. That's how important I think this is. I hope you think it's as equally important. All right. So with that, I am open to any and all questions. There's some questions I may not be able to answer, and I'll be honest, and I'll tell you what those are. It will be a challenge for me because we have not done the analysis yet to address a specific situation. Would I do this or would this technology do that? I probably just won't answer those questions for you, and I'll tell you that I can't answer those questions because I think we need to answer those together. But if you do have questions, I'm ready. Yes? Oh, I'm sorry. 1 second, real quick. On the phone, if you can unmute if you want, and you can ask questions, or you can email them to that email address, and Mary will make sure that I answer that question. Outstanding. Thank you very much. Okay.
I was curious on your selected IT functions that you're going to be reviewing to determine whether or not to consolidate. Do you know the number of personnel that you're talking about at this time?
No. What we know is the number of positions through the recent classification process that were classified as IT positions. Okay? But I think the discussion needs to go beyond that list to there are other people completing other IT functions. So a full number, no, I don't have that. Right now, I'm trying to think back on the list number. There were, including empty and full positions, there were 160 or more positions classified as technology positions. Oh, and I forgot to respond. I forgot to read the question. The question that was asked was, do I know how many people would be involved in this?
Okay, and a follow-up to that is you mentioned the HR classification. One of the things that came out of the HR classification is that they were going to further define IT positions and potentially reclass them. Is that going to be put on hold until this is done?
Again, I don't know the answer to that question. So the question was, as part of the IT classification process, there were a number of positions that were mentioned that they were going to look at reclassifying. I don't think they were actually noted to be reclassified. What was announced was there were 60-plus positions that were all termed IT analyst. They all fell in that same classification. And I think all of us in this room know that of those 67 people, there's probably 65 different jobs going on within that with different responsibilities. And so there is some granularity that's needed. I have not had the specific discussion of whether or not that process would wait. That discussion was had before we even entertained this particular option, but that's an outstanding question, and we'll capture that and we'll get an answer for you. Yes?
I have probably one of your unanswered questions.
Okay.
And this is the
So did the FFF, there, from looking at the document, it could be construed that it was looked at from the dean's and level and down. And so the question is, was there a look up? There was discussions throughout the level of the university and about potential efficiencies. Or really throughout this process, the marching orders that we got that nothing was off limits for discussion. And that's exactly the way it should be when you're entertaining something like this. As far as specifics go, no, there was not a discussion about that specifically, about the option of the CIO being a vice president. No, there was not that discussion. Yes?
What sort of timeline are we talking about here?
What sort of timeline are we talking about here? In the memo, you'll notice that the completion date for both of these particular initiatives was set for July of 2016. Okay. Obviously, the process of looking at centralizing processes, technology, and personnel is a long-term project. And to be done right, you need to take your time and you need to do it well. I don't have the project milestones for you right now about when specific events would occur, but we would commit, if this proposal is accepted, to being done with whatever the scope is that we define by July 2016. Unfortunately, I don't have anything more detailed to provide right now, because that's going to require information from all of you to help figure that out. Yes?
What would be the best type of input that the committee, that we could submit to the committee over the next 2 weeks? And then the second question would be, 2 weeks seems like a very small window even to figure out how one portion of this might impact the department. For example, prioritization, how the projects get prioritized.
Agreed. The question was somewhat two-part. What type of input would we proceed, or would I like to have? So let me answer that one first. Okay. Well, actually, let me answer the second part first. The second part was more about. Can you repeat the second part for me? I lost the second part. I'm sorry.
My concern is that you've asked for a 2-week window to input for the committee to decide whether we're going to move forward or not. And my concern is that 2 weeks may not be enough time for different departments to figure out whether this is going to be a completely negative or positive or somewhere in between process. It's difficult to figure out the impact in 2 weeks to give you valid input to say, yes, go forth, this sounds great with the vague ideas of how we're going to move forward, or non-specific is better than vague. So my concern is, geez, if we figure out the prioritization of projects in 2 weeks and how that could work for individual departments, it doesn't leave any other time to evaluate the others.
Yeah, so thank you. So the second part of the question I was struggling with, I'm just going to answer both parts of that together. The 2-week period is somewhat in response to the timing that we need to have in order to answer the State Board of Education's questions to us. Last Wednesday, right before the board meeting, our provost found out the response format that we were supposed to provide. Okay, so there's been a lot of work done and valuable work again, but now we know a little bit about how we need to respond to that. And we have to respond to that at the August board meeting. And information has to be well prepared well before that August board meeting. So if we work backwards from that, you'll see why we have a 2-week time period. The 2-week time period is not the time to figure out how do we do prioritization or which projects get done or the specifics of this. Okay? So the input that we really want to receive is based off the, what term did you use before?
Non-specific.
Thank you. Non-specific. Hopefully the information I've provided gives you a little bit more in the way of specifics. And what we want to do is to take some of that information and what are your concerns are the big thing. Where do you think this could fail? Where do you think this hasn't been thought through? Those kind of questions. Okay. I would equally like to hear the advantages of doing this, if there are advantages to doing this, in your opinion. But the concerns are my primary area. I have done this before at other institutions, the centralization process, and it is challenging. And I don't claim for a second to know all the things that need to be done. And I don't claim to know how it would impact all of you and your concerns about that. So that's really what I want to hear about. And hopefully that in a 2-week time period, you're able to sit down and digest a little bit about what we've talked about and come up with those concerns. And whether or not I can address those during this 2-week period is probably the answer is no. I can't provide specific answers to those, but know that they are going to be noted. I am going to commit to, when we get this feedback, we are going to publish this feedback, okay, openly. I may have to edit some of it. I may combine some of it together because there'll be multiple people who will respond with the same type of thing. And then over time, we're going to address each and every one of those in some way. So you'll see your feedback and you will see how it's been responded to. Okay? Give me your concerns. Where do you think this is not going to work? What do you think needs to be thought through? Okay? Yes?
Where and when will the presentation be made available?
That's a great question. I'm guessing that it's going to be available on the ITS website, and then we'll put a link to that in the register or something like that so that people will know where that is. When will it be available? As soon as I can get some help getting it put up, because I'm not going to edit the presentation anymore. And then the video will probably be available in exactly the same place if you want to rewatch something or listen to what I said again and digest that. Thank you. Other questions? These are big topics. I've thrown a lot at you today. I totally understand that. If you want to digest it today and come back at 2 o'clock, you might consider coming back at 2:20 because I'm going to do the same presentation again. And then you can answer, or you can ask more questions then. You can certainly send questions to the list we have. You can put comments into the Provost website. But again, I encourage you to take the opportunity to give us the feedback that we need to decide whether or not to do this, and then hopefully that same feedback will help make it a successful process if the proposals are accepted. Anything else? Yes?
Seems like outlining costs and benefit goals and objectives. It would be interesting for us to take a pass at those and decide whether your proposal will actually accomplish what you laid out needs to be. And if there are concerns or issues or costs that the proposal doesn't quite identify, need to be raised so that there's a wide informed decision about whether centralized versus decentralized will actually accomplish all those things.
Right, that's excellent feedback. And I hope that that's part of the concerns or the the potential issues that are raised out of this.
Can you repeat what you said?
Yeah. Dave told me to do it, and I still forgot. Yeah, she said really what needs to happen, too, is an analysis of what we're projecting potential savings to be, and then to have an opportunity for other people to be able to validate that, to to look at some of the assumptions that we're based on, and to do some of their own analysis and see if they agree with those particular figures. Is that correct? Okay, thank you. All right. Well, if there's no more questions, thank you very much for coming. Feel free to come back at 2:30 or use any of the other mechanisms to get feedback to me. And I look forward to getting it. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.